This is Coach Jason Ballard, and I'm a business wingman. Over the years, I've learned a lot from working in our family construction business, serving as a senior officer in the United States Air Force, and running 12 different organizations around the world. Many people helped me get to where I am today, and it's my mission in life to serve as a personal wingman to others. That's what this podcast is all about, providing knowledge, tools, resources, and mentorship to help people soar to their highest altitude. Welcome back to the Soar Higher podcast. This is your host, Coach Jason Ballard. It's a real honor to be with you today. Got another exciting show in store for you. Another awesome guest. One of my favorite new people that I have met recently for many reasons, which you will soon find out here on the show. Today, we're talking about something that's prevalent with people everywhere in every level of any organization, whether you own a business or a CEO or you're a mid-level manager or a frontline employee. Today, we're talking about fear, people's fear of change, how to overcome it, and how to fly to a whole nother altitude. Today is going to be a very powerful podcast. Today, we've got somebody that is an awesome change agent, guides all kinds of companies all over the world through the hard, difficult challenge of moving people and companies and organizations forward in a positive, energetic, motivational way to achieve bigger and bolder goals. Today, we have the privilege of having Sarah the Pivitor Kalmeta on the show. So let me tell you a little bit about Sarah. Sarah is the owner and CEO of Pivot Point International, which is a coaching and mentorship firm that helps companies smoothly go through the change process. She's also a podcast host of her own and a keynote public speaker, a published poet, and what I like, more importantly than all that other cool stuff, is she's a space and aviation enthusiast, among many other things. She's a very multi-talented, faceted person that has worked with companies like Goldman Sachs and Singapore Airlines, just to name a few. Real privilege to have you on the show. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's great to be here.
And we're glad to have you. It's always great to always have another aviation-oriented person on the show. As you know, you all know, I have an aviation background. Soar Higher is all about aviation and soaring higher, and in many different ways. So glad to have you on the show. Sarah, tell us a little bit about you and your background and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I also love connecting with other aviation and aerospace aficionados. I call myself a space nerd all the time, and I'm always looking up in the sky. My first two words, believe it or not, were for star and airplane. So
Hmm.
I've loved it since I was a little girl, and I found myself at Embry-Riddle for college. I had done Civil Air Patrol when I was in high school, but ultimately chose to go down the civilian route. And while I love being around airplanes, when I would go flying, I didn't have that same hunger and passion that many of my friends had.
Hmm.
It was fun, but it wasn't this end all be all of my existence. But when I get into a hangar, I'm like a kid in a candy shop. So I found this path forward where I could study business and aviation, be around the thing that got me really excited, and just started paying attention to the opportunities that were there and allowing myself to be open. I fell into the world of business aviation, working with private jet aircraft shortly after I graduated university. And that led to opportunities overseas because I had studied Mandarin and Asian studies at school as a minor. So I was overseas for 13 years. And then I came back to the US at the end of 2021. At first, I thought I was on a 2-month holiday. That turned into a 2-year being back in America before I went back home to Hong Kong to say goodbye to everybody. And now I live in Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. Well, you have been around the world. How was your experience in Asia? How did that really um, kind of impress things upon you to, help you to where you are today? How was that influencing you?
I had a major influence. I went there pretty quickly after I had graduated university. So I believe I was 22 when I first went overseas. And so the bulk of my young adulthood and early career was there. And so I had this really unique perspective of aviation, of a market that was emerging still over there, whereas in the US it was very mature, a very different outlook and perspective on how to motivate other people, particularly amongst the different groups and cultures, right? Because every country is so vastly different. And you can arguably say the same thing in the US, right? There's cultural differences between New York and California and Miami and Texas. And the way you motivate can differ regionally, but it's really a whole different animal when it's a different country with a very different culture, set of values, complex operating system. So I feel that I really learned a lot of emotional intelligence as well as communication, the ability to read between the lines and understand that there was a question beyond the question that was being asked, or the intention of, why are they wanting this information was very different to what I might be used to. So I really learned how to let go of assumption, and that helped me to start thinking more outside the box. What
Yeah.
are some of the other ways that we can get to our outcome without following this traditional linear process? And I feel that that was really powerful, because when you're in such a different environment, you also start to question your own held assumptions and beliefs and thought processes. And then you have this integration that occurs. It also really gave me the opportunity to travel to many different places for work, and that again, more exposure to different mindsets, way of doing things. And I was able to take all the things that felt really good for me and what I felt worked in the different environments, and then apply those in a different way. So that exposure to the difference is what really helped me to forge those new pathways.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I've lived and worked overseas a lot too, mostly in Europe and in the Middle East. Never had a chance to really live in Asia like you did. But, I have found as well, it just opens up your mind to a whole different way of thinking.
Yeah.
In America, we do what we do in America, but in other places they do things differently in many ways. Not in all ways, but in many ways, right?
Right.
And there's power in that. It took me out when I was in the Middle East. I was a commander. I was a leader in the military at that time, and to get anything done in the Middle East, there's a cultural thing there where you had to actually kind of overcome some of my comfort zones, right? I'm the kind of person that likes some space. I don't like people in my personal space. I think a lot of Americans are that way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But when you go to the Middle East, they get in your personal space, and
Right.
yeah, I had to get comfortable being comfortable in that situation because that's how they built trust.
Right.
You don't sit down and just like get right to business in the Middle East.
Right.
We had to sit down and we had to drink tea and we had to eat some food they cooked. And if you turned it down, it was like an offensive thing to them, right?
Right.
And so if you're trying to build relationships and rapport and trust and all these things, we'd sit down and talk for an hour before we even got to business. It was about
Yeah.
family. It was about all kinds of other things. And it caused me, which had a positive impact on me too, because it caused me to think differently, to pause, be
Mm.
more patient,
Yeah.
and listen better. And so, it sounds like you've had some similar experiences, and that's really, really wonderful. So tell me, Sarah the Pivitor, why why do you have the nickname the Pivoter? Where did that come from? There's got to be a cool story there.
Yeah. So when I was setting up my business in 2020, I came up with the name Pivot Point International. And for me, it was this recognition that every moment in time is this opportunity. We're at a pivot point, and I can go this direction, I can go this direction. It's this inflection point, and it's the moment before the decision. And most people really only view big decisions as a pivot point. For example, when I graduate school, when I get married, when I have children, if someone passes away, all of these kind of life events that are um, times of change. But
Yeah.
what about all the change that we go through in our day, the different roles that we play, the different jobs that we hold, the way that we show up in different spaces, right? Jason, the coach, is a different output than Jason as a husband or as a father or
Mm.
as a community member, and recognizing that we're actually pivoting all the time. So that's where I got the name. And for me, also in engineering, pivot, the symbol for pivot is a triangle.
Hmm.
So I have a spinning triangle as part of my logo to indicate the dynamic choices that we always have. But as far as sticky branding, Pivot Point International is like, it's okay, whatever. And at that time, too, a lot of people started to use this word. And interestingly enough, there's a hair salon in Hong Kong called Pivot Point, so it was just,
Hmm.
I was trying to find something that was different. And I think one day I was just flipping through, I was reading an aviation article and I saw this image of Rosie the Riveter. And she is an iconic image for women in aviation, right? This kind of like call to arms, this movement. Rosie was not just one person in World War II, it was the icon of women in the industry.
Yeah.
And, it brought women in the aerospace industry, aviation, to 63%, which then dropped after the war. But it was this huge driving force of like, what's possible, what's different.
Hmm.
And I had done studies on her in school and reports and things. And so I was like, Riveter, pivoter. Oh, Sarah the Pivitor, right? And I talked about it to a few people, and they're like, "Hey, that's really cool. You should totally do it." And
Yeah.
I even did a whole photo shoot where I put on like a bandana. I had long hair then, and I like did the arm, um, and like made this whole campaign. But instead of "you can do it," it was "we can do it."
Hmm.
And so just played with it a little bit to make it more my flavor. And even people who don't know Rosie the Riveter, when I say that name, when I show them the picture, or if I do this, they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I remember. It's yellow background, right? That one."
Yep.
So and it's worked. People see Sarah the Pivoter now, and there's a whole group of people that don't even know my last name. They introduce me as Sarah the Pivoter when they're introducing me to people.
Great story. And I think that's a really good kind of brand for you. Now that I've gotten to know you a little bit, I mean, that's a really good brand for you because you are a pivoter. You are a outside the box thinker. You're innovative. You're creative. You know how to ask hard questions and see things from different perspectives. You are curious, and all of those things are important when you're trying to move people. You're pivoting them from point A to point B, or a mindset from
Yeah.
going north to going west, or whatever that may be. And so I think that's awesome. And I think you're really good at pivoting people and your creative ways of connecting with them so they can think about things differently to even start the process of change.
Yeah.
And I think that's hugely wildly important. So tell us, how did you get into coaching? Like you're coaching and mentoring and kind of pivoting people through things in different stages of maturity in their business. How in the world did that get started for you? It's like woke up one day, I think I'm just gonna be a change coach today, and what the heck? Why not? How did
Yeah.
that get started?
Uh, so that's an interesting question to figure out the exact origin point, because when I reflect, this was something that was very much a part of my personality in school. I did some like mediation, peer mediation work when I was in middle school. I remember like helping kids mediate fights and offering the perspectives and helping bridge that gap. And, that kind of, again, when I did Civil Air Patrol, I actually helped with getting more girls into the program and just these. I acted as a bridge between these different states, right? And then when I started to enter the workforce, because of this influence and ability to connect with other people and the genuine curiosity, and I love learning. Um, if I could be a modern day philosopher and just get paid to like do that, which I kind of do, being a podcast host and getting to have these conversations and speak. But I love it. I would go to school until the end of time, and I will educate myself until the end of time because I think that that's truly how we continue to grow and evolve. And the companies identified that, so they would then send me to training. I'd get a certification. I'd have a qualification. I'd come back and I would deliver it to the team because in aviation, as I'm sure you recognize with your clients too, there's often this, well, that might work in corporate America, but that's not going to work for me because I do operations here, or it's 24/7, or insert excuse, insert reason for I don't want
Yeah.
to change. So I was able to take what I learned and translate it, if you will, into a digestible, palatable format within the aviation space, within my team. And so then that just continued to grow. And I did my own executive certificates and training and coaching certifications. So when the transition came for me setting up my own business, it was this kind of natural evolution into doing that on my own. But it very much started from a younger age, and then having that support within the organizations that I worked for to leverage and develop that skill set.
That's awesome. You definitely, some people are cut out for um this type of coaching and some people aren't. Not that anybody couldn't be a coach or a mentor. Everybody can be a mentor. Everybody can coach something somewhere. But to be in the business world, to be working with people in the corporate sector or whatever. I mean, it takes some special skills that you have, that curiosity, that ability to ask hard questions without making people feel, inferior and,
Right.
like they did something wrong. I mean, it takes some special skills to do that. And you're really good at, literally navigating through that and finding the way to get people on the bus of change, which is very difficult, right? And human beings naturally want to resist that. And so if I'm a company out there, what types of things need to exist? What's going on in the company that would get me to think I need Sarah the Pivoter in my business to help us? What kind of symptoms, what kind of things are going on um, that really call you into the organization to help them?
Yeah. So the symptoms are often your star employees are starting to disengage.
Mm,
They're making more mistakes. They don't seem to care as much. They're getting frustrated more easily over really small things. There's so that's a major symptom because that means that if they're not already experiencing burnout symptoms, they're on the verge. You're finding that you have more people calling in sick, taking unexpected leave and not being reachable, right? And so you're having to kind of pick up these pieces. Imagine it's like being on a unicycle and you've got 50 spinning plates and they're starting to wobble and then they start to fall. Uh, Usually attrition is quite high. So you're finding employees are not staying. The new people you're hiring are not necessarily staying for long periods of time, or you're even having some mid-level managers put in resignation. And you're finding bottlenecks. You're experiencing that there is some initiatives being moved forward at some level, but there's a permafrost layer. So from top
mm.
down, maybe the board is all involved, the executive team is driving this forward, but the people that really need to implement it and drive it down into the day to day, not just the theoretical, are resisting you. and they're actively maybe not doing or speaking against, right? So there's a disharmony within the team. Gossip is usually up, and there's uh, a sense of unease. And I know with hybrid working environments, that can exacerbate an existing problem, or it can hide the problem because you're not there to see and feel what's going on. But generally speaking, customer complaints will go up. People will be calling in sick more, and you're finding that the people that used to be able to handle quick changes, last minute work, or the occasional, need to work extra tonight to get this by the deadline, are pushing back, or they're breaking down, right? They're not handling things with the most decorum that they can.
Yeah. So bad things are starting to happen, right? Things aren't working well. People aren't getting along. People aren't staying. Customer service is declining. So there's this kind of maybe a starting of a spiral effect of some negativity, negative things happening. So what's causing that? Like things are going well, and then something happens. Like people just normally don't automatically disengage just because they feel like disengaging today. Most people
Right.
want to come to work and make a difference and work hard, earn their pay, all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the root causes that drive some of this even in the first place?
That's a great question, because it's true. No one wakes up and says, "I'm going to be average today."
Yeah.
That's not a thought that we have. But when we're not feeling supported, and we're not feeling understood or seen and heard, that's when we start to disengage. And so it can often happen when management makes a promise, but they don't deliver on that promise. And they don't communicate why they haven't delivered if they haven't. So, a very big thing during COVID was, let's run these resilience and well being seminars for our team, and let's show them that we care. But they would just do it to check the box. There was
Mm.
no follow up, there was no follow through, and it was not really taken seriously. And so, when you do have initiatives, of course, things, I just read something earlier today, and it was something along the lines of, when you make uh, a plan, then God will change it. And it's, we can't change what nature does, what happens, right? We could plan all day long, and then the thing that we don't expect comes out of nowhere. So it's really, how are you communicating that? So most of the time, people are not communicating correctly, or they're having different conversations that are not important. And so the root cause is often empty promises made, driving people too hard, trying to extract every little bit of value from them rather than develop and nurture, right? Think of it like a
Yeah.
garden. You can't just plant the seed and every single season do the same thing, because then we have the Dust Bowl situation. It's just literally,
Mhm.
there's nothing there. You can't grow anything. And now you have to go somewhere else. And so when we're treating our employees like they're robots, right? We're not giving them enough rest, or we're not hiring correctly for the workload that we actually have. That's when these things start to come through. Another very toxic situation is having uh, you don't have a balanced scorecard. For people who have read that book, that's an excellent book, but you're looking at the wrong metrics. So if you're rewarding a certain behavior, that's going to get done. So let's say you reward sales, right? That's very common. But if you're rewarding sales only, but not longevity of the sale, I'll use business aviation for example. You bring in a new client, you got the client to the aircraft management company, great, you get your sales commission. But this client leaves 8 months later because they weren't taken care of, they weren't happy. If that person doesn't care about that, or there's no metric tied to the longevity, there's no bonus for each additional year that this client stays on, this person cares about one thing and one thing only. They will sell just to sell and make their money on the front end of the sale, which creates a really poor experience for the client and the support teams that then have to deliver on these promises that are not real, or maybe inflated or conflated, right? And that just wastes energy and resources. So making sure that you are measuring and tracking the right metrics and rewarding the behaviors that you want. Because if you're only rewarding one thing, then that's the only thing that will get focused.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And life rewards action and results, right? So it's interesting enough. We're talking about change. So I give you an example of some things I see on a regular basis. People will take some kind of a 360 survey. There's this anonymous thing that goes out to the employee base that asks them a bunch of questions about the culture, the leadership, the relationships, the quality of life in the company, and all these kind of things, and people fill it out and give them the feedback. And management's, oh yeah, we want their feedback, we love
Right.
our people. And then whoever administers the survey comes back to them, back briefs them, gives them all the trends, and gives them all the data, packaged in a certain way with, they have recommendations, they can take action, and nothing happens.
Right.
And they do it again the next year and nothing happens. So it's interesting when you're thinking about change and resistance to change, is that when there is no change, change will happen on its own. If
Right.
leadership doesn't make some necessary changes based off validated feedback from the company, like, hey, the roof is leaking. It's making our work environment wet. We probably need to fix the roof so it doesn't rain inside on our employees. And next year later, you have the same problem. Like, it's like, so when leadership doesn't implement a change, the employees will implement a change. That could
Right.
mean revolting. That can mean disengagement. That can mean all the things you've named off, to include leaving, right?
Yes.
So it's interesting to think about the change dynamic, and that we always talk about change as it's really hard to get a change, in place because everybody's stuck to their old ways. That's the way we've always done it. But yet, if you don't make a change, people will make a change for you.
Right. And then you're not driving the ship, right? And I love that you just used this roof analogy because I just saw something yesterday and something that I was reading. The best time to upgrade your roof is when the sun is shining. You
Hmm.
can't do roof repairs when it's raining already, right?
You
Nothing's gonna
shouldn't.
stick. It's not gonna it won't be it'll be a temporary fix, but it won't
Yeah.
actually solve the problem. And yet all the companies are, "Oh, the sun is out. There's no problem," right? And then it
Right.
rains the next day and they're like, "Oh my gosh, there's all these holes. Where'd they come from?" And they frantically, do whatever they can to mitigate the damage in that situation, but it's already too late, right? And then those become systemic, and now the whole roof is warped and moldy and everything, and you have a lot more work to do. It's a lot more costly, and you feel the pain of that more than if you had done the repairs and maintained properly along the way.
That's right. So you're talking about being proactive and thinking ahead and being more strategic than reactive to something. And I think that same principle applies to our people and our processes and our
Yes.
systems. Upgrading your systems, putting in mature processes that based off lessons learned and proven strategies that
Yep.
are working, and the discipline to go through that. Even hiring the right people. I was listening to a video I saw recently with Coach Nick Saban, of former coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide, and he was talking about how in any organization you want the best people on the team. Like, who wants to hire mediocre
Right.
people for your team? Like, yeah, I've never met a business leader that woke up and said, today's a great day just to hire some slumpy, frumpy people that are just going to kind of do basic stuff for, cheap rates. No, everybody wants an A team, right? But the problem is that A players, and this is kind of where Nick Saban was really driving this conversation, that A players only want to play with A players. A
Yes.
players don't want to play with C players.
Right.
And the C players can't hang with the A players. So that creates a problem. And
Yeah.
he said, the biggest challenge in coaching a football team, just like any CEO has in running a company or an organization, is that you've got to figure out the A players and the C players and everybody in between, and figure out who's getting on the bus, and
Right.
more importantly, who you need to get off of the bus, so
Yes.
that you have a strong, cohesive team that can work together, do their jobs, their individual jobs on the team, so the team works well as a well-oiled machine, right? That was a really powerful lesson in football and how that carries over into business.
Absolutely. And sometimes you have the right people on the bus, but they're in the wrong seat.
That's
So
true
it's
too.
making sure that there's alignment there, and as someone grows and evolves their skill set, putting them in, that right place where they can thrive, right? If if you need a presentation done and there's someone on your team that loves PowerPoint, let them put that together, right? They're going to do it
Yep.
quicker, it's going to be better, and both of you are going to be using your energy in the most efficient way possible, rather than you slogging through and procrastinating and avoiding and then maybe not even having something very powerful to present. So it's about, being really aware of where people, I like to use the upgrade that bus analogy to an airplane analogy, right? Weight and balance. You can't have everybody in the front of the airplane. You can't have them all on the right wing. So everyone's
Mhm.
supposed to be on that airplane, but make sure they're in the right place. And I think that that is something that a lot of companies don't spend time on. And we're trying to have this kind of cookie cutter box formula, and that's just not how it is. A lot of positions can evolve and grow, but when's the last time you updated that job description? When's the last
Yeah.
time you looked at your systems and process? Maybe that worked when you had 50 people, but now that you're 500 people, that system is under strain and it doesn't support the growth, and now you're limited, right? So what is it that you can do to relieve that pressure and to put the systems in place? And I read an article with Harvard Business Review the other day about focus leaders. And to your point about the kind of A team and the C players, and who's willing to do what, a lot of the times it's about willingness, not capability,
Yep.
because you can train capability, but you need the right attitude. You need the people willing to learn and to grow and adapt as things change. And they actually talked about people whose brains think in systems. Like, you give them a page with a bunch of dots on there and they can find a formula, a system, how it all works together, right? Their brains work differently and they're really good at systems and process. Most often, those people are not very good at leading other people
Yep.
because they're not as tuned in to body language, emotional intelligence skill sets, just because they're so far, like, just like this person who's leading and motivating and influencing other people, you gave them that thing of dots and they'd be like, I don't know. But
Huh.
you give them the system worked out, they can lead people through that system and they can make it happen.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. So this bank actually created two career tracks where those systems and design thinkers were over here, and they would consult the leaders of the business units rather than lead a team themselves. But they still had a pathway to be able to grow and be developed and, work their way up in terms of salary and recognition and everything
Yep.
else. And I thought that was such a brilliant way of delineating these two paths, because if we can do that, it doesn't have to be a bank, it can be many businesses. And you have the kind of advisors that come in and can work on that system piece and the larger, how does that fit into the whole, rather than just this business unit here looking at this system, but forgetting they're part of a much larger organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So, love the stories, love your analogies. I think what you do is so important, so powerful. Talk to us about how you work with people, right? We've talked about the symptoms and some of the issues going on. And so sometimes people are just, maybe there's a leadership change and maybe a new direction or a vision. Sometimes it's a transition. Sometimes it's a merger and an acquisition. Sometimes it's it could be anything. Sometimes
Yeah.
there's a rebranding. Like, so let's talk about you coming into the picture. What is your process? Like, how do you work with people? How do you connect? Where do you get started? And how do you take people through that and take them to the distant end, the end state of what they're trying to achieve?
Yeah. So what I have traditionally done is I've come in kind of like think of it as an intrapreneur type of role, right? So I become an integral part of the team, but I'm not necessarily a full-time employee that's, part of the system. So that outsider perspective really helps with buy-in because it's not a political game. I'm able to cut through some of the noise that people no longer see, right? The people of New York City do not hear the sirens in the background or the street noise, but people who visit and who live in a small town somewhere, they hear all of that noise, right? And
Mm.
it's overwhelming. And so being able to notice that for noise and saying, this is actually going on, you just don't see it anymore is really, really powerful. So the way I do it now is I come in to a sales or leadership summit, whether it's for association, like at a conference, or it's for a company, and we'll have already identified like what is the theme of that event, what are they talking about, and I'll come in and deliver a keynote. And my core message is about slowing down so that you can build a strong foundation and perform better. Everybody wants to get to their goals fast. They want the outcome now. We live in this instant world, but we cannot get there if the process is really bumpy along the way and if we're rushing through things that then create collateral damage. So, how do we pause, get a really good assessment of everything, and then move forward in a way that supports those goals rather than only getting the one thing at the end, but now having to do damage control on relationships, clients, partners in the industry, et cetera. So I'll come in usually in those scenarios and deliver, a keynote where the whole point of a keynote is to strike a chord with people, have them feel something different. And it's a journey. You go on an emotional journey through a keynote where you're checking in with yourself and recognizing, hey, that's me. That's my world. Oh, that makes sense. And you're starting to connect the dots in a way that's not confronting. Because often, as you said, when we don't want to change, so people will say, yeah, I know, but they intellectually conceptualize something, but they don't feel the need for the change often until they're in a situation that's so jarring, they have no choice. So I come in that format, and that's the kind of initiation, that's the spark that gets people on board. So now everybody's on the same page.
Mm.
From there, I'll often deliver a 2-hour workshop on the back end where we dive into more of the how to. And then if they want to work together in more depth, I'll usually be joining their existing internal teams as the outside consultant and working together to bring those initiatives to life by putting them into practice.
All right. So make sure I got this right, right? There's like a kind of like a kickoff with the leadership team. You'll do an address to the organization, the group, whoever needs to be part of that to really um, talk about the issues, talk about the reason for the change, and start getting people out to think differently, to kind of get them to, prepared to open up their minds to whatever this journey is going to take them on, to be open, to contribute, to engage. And then that turns into some workshops where you can break these things down into smaller bites and pieces for people to digest and work through and kind of maybe retrain their muscles, develop some new habits. And then you'll even break it down even farther with some, coaching sessions, some consulting work kind of behind the scenes to help them still continue seeing those gaps and kind of be accountability to follow through on all of these things to ensure they don't revert back to their old to their old ways. Is that, did I say that right or did I miss it?
No, you got it. That's exactly right. That would be a pathway for a company that is working to drive cultural change, organizational change, and really what I'm there to do is unlock new perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody like you that comes in, it's all about seeing things that other people don't see.
Right.
Leaders don't always see everything in their subordinates. They show up in meetings, they have a conversation, they go away, they go do their work, but they're not seeing everything sometimes. And sometimes they don't see the forest due to the trees. They're too
Right.
close to things. Especially if they own a program or a project, and there's pride and things involved
Emotional
because
connection.
it's their baby, right? You dare call my baby ugly
Right.
or missing an arm or whatever, right? People are passionate about that kind of stuff. And so what it seems like to me is you have a very good um uh safe environmental place that you take people to look at these things objectively, to ask questions and to explore art of the possible ways to move forward to achieve things in a different way. That's powerful.
Thank you.
That's powerful. Thank you so much for being on this show. This is a show that I'm passionate about. That I every week want to give people free advice, free tools and resources to help them. If they learn one or two things, one little quote or one little tip that can be put in their toolbox, we've achieved our goal for this show here. And so you've gave us a multitude of wonderful things. I've been taking a lot of notes throughout this episode, and just thank you for what you do. What you do is hard. It is hard to change people and minds, especially through emotion and passion and distrust and all kind of drama that's out there and that exists in this world today. We're globally, economically going through some major shifts
Yeah.
in how we work, how we communicate, how we deliver our product. I mean, we're going through seismic activities in that space that requires somebody like you to really help them make it happen, because a lot of people struggle in that space. So thank you for that. Sarah, as we kind of depart today, what are I guess, the top one or two things that you would like to foot stomp that is most important takeaways for our audience today?
Thank you. The number one thing that I would like the audience to take away is to give yourself permission to slow down.
Mm,
All the busyness of today wreaks havoc on our nervous systems, on our health, on our ability to solve complex problems, on our ability to make decisions. And if we can't slow our bodies down, our systems down, we can't go to sleep. And the latest sleep research actually tells us that the most important functions for executive functioning, your cognitive ability, your decision making, your attention span, are severely impacted. And not only that, if you're sleeping only 6 hours a night, if you do that 10 days in a row, it's like your system has been awake for 24 hours.
ooh,
And a
ouch.
lot of people only sleep 6 hours a night. And so I'm a
Mm,
really big I will put my hand up and say I was at every event, I did all the things, and I had to really give myself permission and work to continually know that it's okay. A lot of times busyness is also a response, a coping mechanism to not dealing with other things. And so it's really give yourself the permission to slow down and learn to process whatever might be there that you might be hiding from. Because a lot of times we use busyness to hide from things that we don't want to face.
yeah, very
And
true.
when we can process that, we are in a much stronger position to make the decisions that are most aligned for us, our businesses, our relationships, and just how we want to show up in the world. So give yourself that permission to slow down and give yourself permission to play.
Yeah.
Play is very important, and it's how we build bonds and how we connect. And we shouldn't be losing this ability after, a certain age. It's very, very important as adults, just as it is for children.
Yeah. Wow, if that doesn't hit home, I don't know what does. Sarah, thank you so much. For folks that want to learn more about you, what you do, your business, your podcast called The Lounge, what's the best way to contact you and connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is sarahkalmeta.com. You can also Google Sarah the Pivitor, The Lounge. I'll pop up on YouTube and you can subscribe to the channel there. I also have weekly episodes. But on my website, you'll be able to find a contact form to book a call. There's the newsletter that I put out. So you'll be able to get everything there, or email sarah@sarahkalmeta.com.
Awesome. Thank you. We're going to also include all of that information in the show notes for your ease and being able to find Sarah. She's a wonderful person doing really amazing things out there to help people go through all kinds of different change and challenges in this world we live in. Folks, that's it for today's show. Next week, you do not want to miss this episode, The Great Engagement. Boy, it's a great piggyback episode coming off of this one that Sarah did such a great job on. This is going to be about why 2/3 of workers are not satisfied, and it's costing us globally $500 billion in economic impact. So we're going to unpack that, figure out what's going on, and figure out how to create a better, great engagement for everybody going forward. Don't want to miss it. Have a great week, everybody.